After the 2008 presidential election, I was teaching this course at the College of Charleston. So it would have been the fall of 2009, and I was lucky enough to secure a guest speaker for one of those classes. That guest speaker happened to be Rick Davis, and Rick Davis was the managing director, the campaign director of the John McCain presidential campaign of 2008. So to say that he was well connected, that he was well versed on the subject of presidential politics, was an incredible understatement. So this is 2008, 2009. This is a high-ranking, seasoned official of the Republican Party, somebody who has run in and run on numerous campaigns at both low levels, the state level, local level, as well as the highest level of a multi-billion-dollar presidential campaign. And he's just lost. And he's just lost a historic election to Barack Obama, and he's in a mood to kind of reflect on what went right and what went wrong. And his overwhelming message to students and to everybody, really, in 2008 after the loss, and then in 2009 when he happened to speak at the College of Charleston, was this: the Republican Party needs to expand. He said, and I'm loosely paraphrasing here, that winning elections is the art of saying nice things to nice groups of people who you would like to show up for you. And his argument was essentially the Republican Party is saying too many mean things about too many groups of people who are then flooding to the left, who are flooding to the Democratic side of the aisle. And he was speaking specifically about black people, and he was speaking specifically about recent immigrants, Spanish speakers, and people of Latin heritage. And so his argument was pretty simple: let's expand or let's die. That was the argument. The campaign that runs after him, not run by Rick Davis, but a 2012 Mitt Romney campaign, essentially reruns a very similar version of the 2008 campaign. There's no meaningful changes along the lines that Rick Davis was suggesting. There is no obvious impetus that the Romney campaign thinks that they need to expand and pick off huge percentages of African Americans or Latinos in the 2012 election, and they run a retread of the 2008 election, and they lose by a little bit less of a margin than McCain lost to Obama by. But they lose to the same person, Barack Obama, and they lose by a very similar margin. And yet again, there was no guest speaker after the 2012 election in my particular class, but yet again, the Republican Party stages a national autopsy. What went wrong? Based on what we've seen in the 2008 loss, based on what we've seen in the 2012 loss, what should we do? And every single major polling firm, except one, every single major polling firm paid for by the Republican Party comes back and says one thesis: demography is destiny. There's an Obama coalition of poor people, of college-educated people, of people of color, and of young people who are turning out, and are turning out in droves, and there's just no way, based on that electoral math, that the Republican Party can ever compete again unless we do as Rick Davis said in Mike's class in 2008, 2009, and expand the coalition that we're building. But there's one polling firm run by Kellyanne Conway, who would later work in the Trump White House and was a frequent guest on many television shows, and also has quite an interesting Instagram and TikTok following per her daughter. She comes back, her polling firm comes back and says, we're doing this all wrong. We're going too soft into our message about race and immigration in America. What we really need is a harder, more vociferous, angrier message, because there are legions and legions and legions of white Americans who feel disaffected with the political process, who hate Republicans, who are immensely fearful about changes in their world, and they will show up. And so the current Republican coalition doesn't have to be that way. We can expand by increasingly alienating the folks that Rick Davis was talking about and attracting white Americans to the polls who have never voted before, who have maybe only ever voted once or twice, but if they see a standard bearer who they think reflects their interests, they will show up, and they will show up in droves. And so what Kellyanne Conway does is to buck the increasing Republican consensus that they need to moderate on race, that they need to moderate on immigration, that they need to moderate across the board and increase their electoral coalition and diversify, and says, no, we absolutely do not. And what we need to find, based on these numbers, is a standard bearer who can reach those folks who have been increasingly disaffected from the process for a variety of reasons. Meanwhile, a guy whose name is Steve Bannon, who would later be chief of staff in the White House, a kind of consigliere to Trump, would head Breitbart News, now has a very popular podcast. He was testing messages, a very anti-elite populist message. Specifically, the phrase was "drain the swamp." His argument was in the wake of 2012, the Republican Party needed to go harder into an anti-elite, anti-coastal message, and he was looking for ways in which he could get that phrase, drain the swamp, and related ideas about draining the swamp and anti-corruption in Washington and so forth, and find a candidate who could carry that message and increase the electoral majority that Republicans might carry. His first thought was that he would find a standard bearer in Sarah Palin, the 2008 VP nominee, who was very much in the populist mold of Donald Trump, but she wasn't interested in it, or for whatever reason, he didn't think she was capable of carrying that message. And he was road testing this with other kinds of candidates, Rand Paul from Kentucky and many others. And then around the 2012 election, 2013 cycle, post-election cycle, begins to think that maybe the person to carry that message is Donald Trump. So my point is that when Donald Trump emerges in 2015, in June of 2015, to run for the presidency, and then ultimately ends up winning in 2016, there's all this groundwork that has been laid. And the story that I want to tell for the 2016 election is specifically on this. Why was Trump, with Kellyanne Conway, Steve Bannon, and many others, able to buck the Republican consensus that emerges in the loss of 2008 and the loss of 2012 and carry a successful electoral coalition in a way that bucked what everybody said the Republican Party needed to do and carry the day in 2016?